morning. This is The Life Roast. I am your host, John. This is also your host, T. What we do here is we try to pop up out of this little box here and have some uncomfortable conversations and challenge some social norms, some cultural norms, and just roast the hell out of them if we possibly can. And today we're going to dive a little bit into the job world, the job environment, and we're going to talk about resumes and job interviews and all things related to that. And I think it's going to be kind of fun. We're going to have a little bit of little fun with it, and then hopefully follow it up with some good advice, right? Some solution-based stuff after we make fun of all the things, of course.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Is that good? Does it sound good to you?
Yeah, it's a world I live in all day long, from interviewing people to finding other people for jobs. People call me left and right. Do I know this person? Do I know that person? Really, do they fit a role? From people right out of college, or even those that don't go to college, to senior level people. Not that I'm a recruiter, but I have enough connections that I would know someone who knows someone. So this is near and dear to my heart. I get to see resumes all the time. I've been involved in too many interviews to count, and it's hilarious. It's hilarious from the sense of the smorgasbord of resume styles and formats and all the things that go along with it, where they were taught this. And I guess the colleges or whatever high school taught them how to write a resume. Sure. They spend so much time on formatting that they forget that no one cares about formatting. They care about the content. Now the thing is, okay, put your picture on it because everyone's got to see your picture, and, the whole thing gets ridiculous. So, that's kind of the conversation today is, what's going on in the job world and how do you get a job? Because, according to statistics, there's 8.2 million available jobs out there right now in the US alone. That's 8.2 million. So for those people that continually say, I can't find a job, maybe this is the conversation you want to listen to, because apparently there's a crap load of jobs sitting there waiting for you to call them up and fill that position. We'll see. I think those 8.2 million probably include, lower level type positions, fast food, things of that nature that are probably dying right now for employees. So with that, I guess let's get into this. So first we'll start with resumes. And the part that I think is hilarious about resumes is it's supposed to be a kind of a quick synopsis of the history of your work and what you've done and kind of the highlights. And again, because I've read so many different resumes, it's fun reading them because I can read bullshit against someone that actually has performed the activities. And you can read the bullshit because if I'm interviewing to be I'll make something up, a crane operator, they write crane in every single job that they've had, where it doesn't elaborate like, oh yeah, and drove a crane. And I did this, and I was a maintenance guy, and I was this, and I drove a crane. Like, you drove a crane or you operated a crane, and
drove it straight down the street.
Yeah, like they were the guy that put it on the truck, so they got all the way. But things like that, where you read the resume and think, come on, buddy, like I could tell just on your writing here that you never actually drove a crane. And I see this at all levels, from CEO level resumes, just what you've done. And you could check it out now. The greatest part of technology now is you're a finger stroke away from the internet and LinkedIn, which is essentially a glorified electronic resume. And some people fill out their LinkedIn. You go to my LinkedIn and there's quick blurbs of what I've done. Mm-hmm. I don't use it as a job tool or a job aid. It's just what I throw up there because I'm supposed to, I guess. But these resumes are you could check, okay, it doesn't match, or there's 9 jobs on this resume, but there's 2 on your LinkedIn. And again, it shouldn't be a disqualifier. It's more or less, okay, did you actually do the things on your resume because they're not on LinkedIn, or is LinkedIn not important to you? I don't know. You can get into it deep enough. Your thoughts?
It's funny that you mentioned that, and there's all sorts of stats that show different things, right? You said 8.1 or 8.2 million jobs out there, and yet somehow people still have a hard time finding a job. So is it because of the lack of preparedness, or is there really a hard time getting jobs? Like, what is the importance of having a resume now in today's time? Like, I'm curious about that, because the last job that I had, I didn't even need a resume.
Right.
I went in and I just had an interview. And of course that was because I knew somebody who knew somebody. And ultimately, like, this is where, I think a lot of people fail to see this whole process, is that, like, a resume is great if you need a resume, but there's a lot of jobs out there. Like, you just got to know people.
Sure.
You just network a little bit, and I'm sure you can find one. But, you mentioned, this is funny. One of the stats that I looked up, because I was curious, is how often people, like, lie on their resumes. Because you mentioned, right, like, you could tell the bullshit apart and stuff like that. And I thought it was funny. And, so of course I come up with this. One of these places reported, 36% of applicants openly admit to lying on their resumes. And when they were asked if they would stretch the truth to seem more qualified, it jumped up to like 56%, right? So over half of people would stretch the truth to seem more qualified, and more than a third of people lie outright on their resumes in order to try to get a job. And of course, there's other statistics here. There's like another study that showed 64% of people lied, and like 81% of them were caught and stuff like that. But it's just the amount of tools that we have at our disposal to write good resumes, and we're just filling it up with a bunch of pretty words and stuff like that. And it's like, I don't think people realize, like, somebody's actually reading those.
Well, here's the great part.
Who knows the job?
Yeah, the great part is now we got AI.
Oh yeah.
And Chat GPT and all these other things. You can just type in a few things to the Chat GPT, and it'll spit out a resume in 30 seconds. And it gives you these high level, like, great sounding sentences.
Oh, for sure.
That really glorify you, where, resumes are tough to write because you're trying to elaborate on what you've done, but not sound like you're blowing smoke up someone's ass. There's a little bit of smoke blowing, but then you get into the AI and it's like, wow, this is eloquent, and it really discusses, and wow, this dude really knows what's going on. And it sounds like he's really great at verbalizing his thoughts. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, are you being honest? Because you really didn't write your resume. AI wrote your resume. So that you may get the job. Maybe your interview skills are good enough to get the job, and then you get in there and they ask you to write up some procedure, or write up some kind of, or write a letter to someone, and you sound like a bumbling idiot in the letter. Like, how is your resume so eloquent and you can't actually fulfill writing for your role or your job? I think AI is going to kill a lot of people.
All right. Well, and so this is the thing about it, right? Is a lot of people spend so much time focused on making sure their resume is so pitch perfect, right? That they go into the interview, and we've talked about this on another episode, right? Like, your qualifications can be way up here, but your ability to interview is so low, right? Like, your ability to communicate, and what do you think's going to happen? You walk in the door, they give you the interview because your resume is golden, and then you sound like absolutely nothing like what was on paper when they first got it. Right. So that whole process is pretty bizarre. And instead, what happens if you are just honest about it, right? Honest about your qualifications. Well, to a degree, right?
Right.
I understand embellishing a little bit, right? Because you want to get the interview.
Sure.
Right. I'm not saying that I wouldn't stretch the truth just a little to make sure I got an interview, right? But I'm confident that if I went into the room and I had an interview, I can clearly communicate what I need to and ask the right questions, right, and have the right responses and stuff like that. But, we spend so much time hyper focused on, again, having that pitch perfect resume, that we forget the entire other part of the process. And this whole AI thing, right? I love AI. Don't get me wrong. I use ChatGPT for stuff, but I'm starting to feel like we're becoming, like, already, it's new, and we're already becoming over dependent on it.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And so, like, having it write our resumes and stuff like that, like, I get it. It's the cheap, easy way to do it. but eventually they're going to catch on to that. There's going to be no personality in it, right? Like they're going to see it. And you got to remember, like people that are reading resumes, that's what they do, right? Like that's what they're looking at your resume because they've looked at hundreds or thousands of other resumes. They're going to see it.
Right. Oh, for sure. For sure. And AI writes in a way that, again, it covers, if you tell them the hot spots and the key points, it's going to write everything exactly the way you need it to, almost to a point when and I've in my role as a consultant, I'm in a lot of businesses, and I read something that someone wrote, and my first question is, did you write this or did you go online? And they always smile and say, I went online. I just couldn't get my thoughts together. And they say, well, how did you know? Because the sentence structure is, it's almost like it makes a point, and this is all in one sentence. It makes a point, elaborates on that point, and then comes back and reemphasizes the point in one sentence. And you think, wow, this is a run-on sentence, and it's well said, but no one speaks like this. So you can automatically tell. And in a resume too, you can, and I went online too, and it's funny. There's articles now that shows you how to dumb down your resume after AI writes it. And it's like, holy shit, here we go. Now everyone knows you can see AI in a resume. So you have to learn to trick the employer because you can't have them see that AI wrote it. But that's a whole different world there. My world of watching this and wanting to have this discussion is, your resume is like the trailer for a movie. It gives enough that says, all right, it's worth it. I'm gonna go check out this movie. It looks like it's funny, or it looks like it's action packed, whatever it may be. So you get to go into the theater. But like many movies, the trailer was the best part of the movie. They showed the 5 or 10 funny snippets for a comedy, and then you get in there and you think, with the exception of those 5 or 10 that I saw in the trailer, the rest of the movie sucked. And I think part of that is your resume. You make this thing look so sexy and brilliant, and God, you look like you're a PhD in whatever it is that you're interviewing for, and then you show up and you're a mental moron during the interview, and you're nervous and you're sweating and you're anxious, and they ask you, what color's the sky, and somehow you divert the conversation to talking about the ground and dirt. Like, what? There was simple answers, and it's like, are we prepared for interviews? And I don't know that you can overly prepare for an interview, but my advice on interviews to everyone that I talk to is, they should be honored to hire you. The question is, what are they going to provide? You better show up with 100 million questions. Like, you're interviewing them. And if you can spin it, automatically that employer is going to look and say, wow, this dude's got their shit going on. Not because you're brilliant, just because you're curious on, what am I walking into? Your resume got you through. Okay, great. There was enough here to have a conversation. But everyone just sits there and says nothing. When I ask, the person could answer all of my questions perfectly. And then I say, do you have any questions for me? No. Everything they just said that was perfect gets destroyed. You have no curiosity? None? Zero?
Well, okay, let me ask you this then, because this is one of the things when we started talking about this discussion and the whole job world, like the interviews, the resumes, and all that stuff. I can't help but go back to the progression of my life, right? And going through high school and all this stuff, and we have education as a totally different thing, but one of the things that I talk about periodically is, when I was in high school, right, I don't remember having a session in a class where we specifically went over how to build a resume properly, and not just how to build a resume, but how to interview, right? The whole process, right? Because I'm sure there's a lot of schools out there that have, like, you take an hour session out of your economics class or whatever it is, I don't know, where they go over resumes, or English. It's probably an English class, I would imagine. I don't know why, but that's just where you write stuff, right?
Sure.
But I'm sure they do it here and there, right? And definitely in college. I know in college they place a little bit of emphasis, but for a system that is so intent on putting people out into the workforce, I feel like maybe there is a little bit of lack in the ability to put people into the workforce, right? And I get I get that there's a lot of job positions out there that don't require you to be able to necessarily communicate your thoughts in some elaborate, concise way, right? There's people who just need to do things,
Right.
right? You don't need to speak, you don't need to do
Right.
whatever, right? And I totally get that. And of course, if those are the jobs that you're going for, cool, because you don't have to be an expert in communications.
Right.
But if you ever plan on having a job interview where you have to clearly communicate what it is that you're good at or what you're bad at or whatever it ends up being, there's nothing substantial in our system that teaches us and prepares us for that. And I think that's like so bizarre, right? that we've gotten to this point. Like, people have to hire people to write their resumes for them, and the fact that people go into interviews now without asking any questions, right? Like, these are dead giveaways that we never learn this stuff.
Right.
You know, and it just blows my mind that we're having this conversation, and I think I learned more about resume. This is funny, right? I think I learned more about resume writing when I was transitioning from prison to the outside world.
For sure.
Like, I learned more about resumes and interviewing in the classes that they provide inmates leaving into the real world than I did from school to jobs.
Yep.
And that right there is just kind of like, what?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't remember, you know, I love people that have memories like an elephant. They remember everything. I don't, but in high school, I was such a goof off that I was probably having so much fun doing whatever I was doing. I may have had these classes, but I don't remember them. So yeah, we had a resume class. I think it was our business finance class or something like that. Taught us resumes or whatever. And there may have been mock interviews. I don't remember. But even college, you know, no one gave me any tutelage on how to interview. But I think in this day and age that if we sat there and said, oh, no, I never had that, I call bullshit. You know, the power of a phone right now gives you anything you need. You go on YouTube and say, you know, interview skills. There'll be 7 million videos that'll show up. So you just keep on watching. But again, the part of that I would tell everyone, and I don't understand this, is people are hiring the person. You have a skill level that they're hoping your resume has already described you have, and they're going to confirm it through a few questions. You know, can you tell me a time when you had this and da da da? And like you said, if it's a job that doesn't require communications, you're a bulldozer driver, you're a technician that works on a CNC machine or something like that. Like, you stand in front of a box for 8 to 12 hours a day. You know, whether or not your personality and your orator skills are fantastic, who cares? But my famous line in any interview, and it's kind of my golden rule that I say in my head, and people might think this is funny. Could I sit and have beers with this person? Can I sit in a bar and have 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 drinks? Could I occupy my time with this person? If the role meant I'm hiring you for bulldozer driver, I just want to know that if after work you want to go grab a beer, I could sit and have a beer with you. Yeah, you have a fun-loving personality, or you can hold a conversation. Great. But if I find out you're the greatest bulldozer driver, I don't give a shit about having beers. My point, though, is if you're in a role, can you communicate during this interview well enough that someone says, wow, I could hang out with you. You're a good person. You have good speaking skills. You're nice to be around. Well, if that's the case and I feel that, then you're going to fit in well with the company. If you're kind of a douche during the interview, or you're like, you know, chachi, like, oh yeah, I got this. And yeah, and I was the greatest at this role. And I was this, like, depending on the role, you might want that.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
But I don't know many people that don't want to hire douchebags. You could be a cocky son of a bitch and be the greatest guy at your job, but you're probably going to be a poison to the business. I mean, again, from a consulting role, my first goal is to find out where the holes and the gaps are. And sometimes they're not holes and gaps. They're just personality flaws that destroy the company. You know, there's a supervisor. He's amazing. He hits all the numbers. They get all the product done. They do all this stuff, but everyone hates him because he's a driver and an asshole. And it's like, well, yeah, let's look at the number of people that quit. Okay, well, the guy's a douchebag. Get rid of him. But I don't want to go on that point. My point there is that you can uncover a lot of this during the interview, but I still go back to, if you're an employee or a future employee looking for a job, you should be interviewing them. I know you get enamored, like, okay, I got an interview. I need this job. I have to do this. I don't want to come off as cocky, or I don't want to come off as too curious. Well, if you're going to practice interviewing, practice asking questions. Like, show up with 30 questions. And don't wait. I freaking hate this. Don't wait until the guy says, okay, do you have any questions for us? Like, that should never come out of their mouth. You should be asking questions immediately.
The whole time.
The whole time. Like, they ask you a question, like, tell me about a time when you had this. Have you ever had a problem with this? Like, well, actually I have, but tell me a time when you have you had that same experience in your role as you work at the company? Like, a lot of times their eyebrows are raised, like, huh? Like, oh, that's a good question. I've never been asked that before. That should be like a point system. How many times during an interview can you get the interviewer to say, wow, I've never been asked that? So, these are the things that no one prepares you for. Show your personality, show who you are. If you're covering up your personality because you're an outgoing, witty person and you just don't want to come off as that, well, you'll get hired.
You'll also get fired.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, like, wow, this is not the same dude that I interviewed with. Like, where'd this guy come from? Like, he was kind of calm and well-spoken. And now in his role, he swears a lot and he's kind of a douche. And like, wow, obviously you don't want to be a douche during the interview so you can get the job, but you get my point. Like, be you.
So this is the application part of it. I think a lot of people don't do enough research. Right. And like, that's my big thing when I'm talking to people. And I even do this. I'll even do this when I'm going into consultations with clients on like the coaching side of things. Is I'll like go onto their Facebook page. I'll find who they are. I'll go onto their LinkedIn or whatever. And not like in a creepy stalkerish way, but I'll just kind of go through and see, like, okay, they're an entrepreneur. What's their business? Okay, I'll look at their business. I'll take a look and see what kind of products or services they provide and see what kind of reviews they got and just the whole thing, right? Just kind of like a general overview so that when I go in, because it's an interview on both ends, I have a good, like, I feel a little bit more connected. I can ask more specific questions. I can relate better with this person. And it's the same thing on the other side, right? Like, when I go in, if I went in to go get a job, I don't plan on it anytime soon. But, one of the things that I like to do is look into the company, right? Look into, if I can find the person that's going to be interviewing me or the boss or whoever it is on LinkedIn or something, I'm going to go to their page and just kind of glance around, right? Just to kind of see what kind of person they are, right? Because this is one of the things that I'll give you right here. This is huge for any kind of communications, right? Matching and mirroring, right? And it's a little bit manipulative. Are you familiar?
Oh yeah,
matching and yeah. So when you go in, it's reading the room, kind of like what we talked about, the other day, is going in and being able to read the energy coming off the other person, and you get this better if you have a little background on who they are to begin with, right? And so when you go in there, if you're matching and mirroring, how loud to speak, how fast to speak, what kind of vocabulary to use and stuff like that. And it's manipulative. And I'm not saying hide your personality when you're doing it. I'm just saying learn, because people like them, right? And so if you can learn how to be the person that they need you to be without sacrificing your morals, your values, your personality and stuff like that, you're much more likely to get in it with them and get the job, because they are going to see that interest, that curiosity. They're going to see that connection right away.
Right.
But a lot of it comes from asking the right questions and learning. If you learn enough about the company, you can go in there with a whole load of questions ready to go. So anytime they say anything and they leave an opening, you ask a question, right? Because they want you to be interested. Most people say, like, I just want a body. Like, that's one of the things in this whole job world. I can't stand this. I see people looking for applicants, and they're like, we just need a body. We just need somebody to show up. And I'm like, that's shit.
Right.
Like, that is the lowest, like, that is the minimum effort that anybody can put in. Right. So if you go in there, and I see it all the time, if you go in there and you ask some questions and you have a good resume and all this stuff, with 8.2 million jobs open, right, you're almost guaranteed to get the job. You might actually not get the job because you look overqualified.
Right.
right? But if you
Right.
go in there and you ask questions and do these things, you're going to stand out among so many people today. It's going to be unbelievable,
Yeah.
right? But most people they settle. They go into the job interview. They're calm and collected. They answer all the questions perfectly because you know what they want to hear. You know what they want to hear. You say the right things, right? But and you might get the job, but you're never going to stand out the way that is.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
maybe you don't want to. I don't know. I'm
right.
just saying, like,
Yeah, I think it depends on the job or the company, and this is again my background experience is when you work from a mom and pop, and they have 11 employees,
mhm.
and they're looking for a new purchasing person, a controller. The company has grown to a point where now the owner doesn't have time to do all the buying and all that, so they're looking for a buyer or controller. Like I said, they don't know how to interview. They're looking for someone, and this is the part where I'm saying, like, to agree with you, like, know what you're walking into, do the research. If you go online, you find out, okay, this company's been around for 6 years, and you drive by the building and it's small. Like, okay, this is not a big operation. Well, you're walking into a mom and pop, and the person doing the interview owns the place. Okay, well, if you think of an owner, he's the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. Like, he's doing everything. So right there, from a rapport building and how to get this guy going, like, so can you tell me about the business and when you started? Because owners love telling the story. And before you get done, he asked you 3 questions, but you asked him 30. And this guy's like, wow, I really liked her. I really liked him. Like, he really knew his stuff. Like, no, he didn't. He just had you talking. And again, that was based on research. But if you walk into corporate America that's got 20,000 employees, 30,000, 50,000 employees, your first interview is usually with what I call the checks and balances person. They're a 24, 25-year-old kid, and I don't say that in a derogatory manner, but a very inexperienced person whose only role is reduce the 100 applicants to 10 good ones. And they're going to ask you 10 generic questions, and they're going to write down your answers and really just make their decision like almost like a robot. Well, again, if you're walking into that, like, know the room, know who you're working with. Like, okay, you got a 25-year-old person. If you're a 45 or 50-year-old person interviewing for this job and you think you're better than them, like, oh, this freaking kid, like, are you dumb? Like, are you really that dumb? Like, this again, it's you are trying to build rapport. And I say this all the time. Like, if you're 50 years old and you got a 25-year-old interviewing you, flip the questions. How long have you worked here? Oh, I've been here a year. How do you like it? Was it what you thought after the interview process you went through? Like, tell me your worst day. What was your best day? What do you love most about your job? Like, now this kid, 25-year-old interviewee, is like, wow, this guy really cares about me. No one ever comes in here and asks me questions. Before you know it, you moved on to the second round. Your resume already said what you could do. This 25-year-old kid's just trying to find a reason to get rid of you. And it's like, why do people sit there and you can tell the poker face is terrible? Like, you can see that you're annoyed by these questions. Like, I can't believe I was a CFO at this other company, and I got to answer these stupid questions from 24-year-old punk kid. This is bullshit. Like, we can see that you're upset by this. Like, know your place. You have 7 more interviews before you get to the actual final yes. Like, this is just the first step. Why are you so upset? Like, you're in the work world. You're not in, I'm so great. Look at my resume. Hire me. Like, just bring me to the CEO. Nah, that's not how this works. Unless, like you said, you have relationships and you may bypass the first or second or third round and you get right to the director of accounting, and he says, okay, well, I'm essentially interviewing my boss if you're going for CFO. Like, well, again, know your role. You're going to be this guy's boss. He's looking for someone to be compassionate and kind and mentoring and all that. Like, are you that during the interview? I don't know. Probably not.
Most people,
right?
Most people aren't. Yeah.
But I think those are the skills, especially when I'm working with younger individuals. Like, and you said it, and we've said it. Like, who are you working with? Know the personality. Like, look around the room. If you're in a stale, just office conference room, okay, there's nothing to go on. Well, then ask good questions. But if you're sitting in the guy's office and you see he's got kids and you see there's a picture of him and his son playing baseball, he's a coach, he's a whatever, you don't need to make it too personal. Like, oh, I see you have kids. Like, know that this guy is just not an interviewer. He's a dad. Hold on. That's a different person.
Yeah, don't make it creepy.
Yeah, nothing. Oh, I see you have kids. Like, what's their names? Like, no, just know the person. Like you have a guy that's a coach. He likes mentoring. He likes leading people. Like, okay, ask a question. Are you see yourself more as an employee or someone that really likes to coach people? Like the guy will give you the famous statement. Wow, I've never been asked that before. Like, I think interviews are great. I mean, my goal when I get in there is how do I get them to talk more than me? And at the end, wow, that's a great interview. I'm like, yeah, it was. I didn't answer shit. But I've been doing this for 30 years, so I'm kind of a pro at it.
Well, again, like you said, like the resume already got you in the door.
Right.
So the fact that you feel the need to reiterate everything that they've already read, which they had to have read to give you the interview, right? You wouldn't have gotten the interview otherwise. I mean, maybe you just turn in an interview depending on where you're going and they just give the resume and they just give everybody an interview. But like corporate America, like they're going through 100, 200, 300, depending on how big the company is, applicants to narrow it down to 50, to narrow it down to 10, to narrow it down to 5, to whatever it is, right? So if you got the interview, you just show up to the interview. Stop worrying about the resume so much. Right? They're going to ask you the questions that they need to ask you. In the meantime, make sure you are asking the questions. And like you said, like this is communications 101, right? Like you saw the picture of him being a kid. Again, don't be creepy about it. Don't say, hey, I see that you got kids, because that might not go over too well, right? Depending on, because you don't know this person, right? You can ask subtle questions out of that picture, And so this is what I was talking about before. It's like knowing how to read the room as the room is progressing throughout the thing, right? Because you might get that one guy, and I've seen this before, where you go in for an interview and the person interviewing is just miserable, right? And that's a big roadblock. Like, how do you deal with that? Because like you want to get them talking, but every question you ask is just, oh, well, like they totally brush it off, or they, give you really short responses. And so like, what are some questions that are guaranteed? I'm going to ask you this because you have a lot of experience with this. Like, what questions would you ask somebody who is just that, like, I always call them a Debbie Downer of interviewers, because they are the 25-year-old. They thought they were going to be higher up in the ladder by now, and they're just pissed off that they have to go through this process of interviewing and narrowing down 100 different people that they don't want to talk to begin with, right? Because you're going to come across that.
Right.
It's going to happen, right? Your resume looks spectacular. The person above them said, hey, interview this person. I don't want to do it, but they do it. And you're trying to be friendly, and they're just brushing you off. And
I mean, it's where I've said, if you can read the room, and that's the perfect example. If you can tell the interviewers like stretched on time, or they're just not into it, and like, oh God, I hate doing interviews and da 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 da. It's where and I've already said this. When you got hired, do you feel like they represented the company exactly as you thought they would, or now that you've been in the role, is it different? Wow, that's a different question. And then they start answering it like, I thought I was going to be here, but and they'll try and represent the company and be all honest, Abe. Well, freaking listen. And that's the other part that amazes me. You are so worried about your next question, you're not actually listening, because your question will come out of what they're telling you. Well, I did notice that when I got here, they told me I'd be doing this role and that role and this, but they actually moved me into this other role. Oh, really? Is this other role as good? Do you like this new role better, or you kind of wish you can go back to the other one? Well, again, now you're interviewing them. Well, I was hoping this. Well, now you're building rapport too. They're complaining about it, or like, oh man, that must have sucked.
Might get somebody to quit their job.
Either way, wouldn't that be hilarious? But going on that, and those are the questions too. Like they'll ask you, and they're trying to check your personality out. And I'm not saying to lie about this, but if you're sitting in front of an interviewer and you can tell, in male or female, that they're in shape, that their muscles are developed, that they're, you could tell they're well put together. When they say, what do you like to do for fun? And again, this is when I say, don't lie. Well, you could tell they work out, say what I like to do, and you have to work out. You can't make this bullshit up. Like, find something that you assimilate with. Like, I like to work out when I'm there, and I like to do this and I like to do that. Immediately, you just crossed into their world without being creepy. Mm-hmm. So, wow, you look good. You look like you work out. No, that's creepy. But I like to work out in my spare time. Again, if you do, don't freaking lie. Oh, really? What do you do? Oh, I like to do CrossFit. Oh, get out of here. I love CrossFit. Well, now all of a sudden the interview's over. Now it's beer time. Now we're sitting having beers and we're talking about CrossFit or like da-da-da-da-da. Like, yeah, I'm actually working up to do the Spartan race. Like, get the hell out of here. I got a buddy that does it. He's psycho, this guy right here. And again, interview's over. You're talking about like, okay, now we have something in common. Now there's something there. Or you see there's a dad sitting there because there's pictures there. Well, I coach my kids. So what do you do in your spare time? Well, I could, if you want my two best answers, I really love working. I always have work going on and I really love coaching my kids. Like, what do you coach? Oh, football and baseball and basketball and soccer and like, get out of here. I coach too. Like, what do you coach? Well, I know you coach baseball because I can see the freaking picture behind your head. But it's like, okay, now we're kindred spirits. We're both dads. We're both coaches. We understand the rat race. You got to get from work. You got to get to this and sometimes it's just rough. It's rough at 5:00. But then that's another, what questions do you have? Do you ever find like at 5:00 when you need to dip out to go coach that you're stuck at work? Wow. All of a sudden a guy's like, that's a great question. Has nothing to do with the business. Now it's personalities touching. Like, shit. Yeah, there are times. What do you do?
I think you just touched on a really important thing too, is when you get to ask questions like that specifically, right? Because one of my big things, again, if I was going back into the job world and looking for a new job, one of my big things is flexibility, right? I got kids. I love coaching my kids and I love having the flexibility to make sure like, okay, one of them's sick. I got to be able to take care of them, or I got to be able to make sure that I get to the game or the practices or whatever, right? And so when you're asking these questions, like that's how you find we don't have to settle for every job we apply to, right? You are allowed to say no,
right? When
they say we want to hire you after the interview process, but you also interviewed them, you can say no, right? But you don't find out. What's worse than finding a job, not asking the right questions, getting into the job, 3 months later realizing, holy shit, this is totally the wrong job for me. I probably should have asked these questions. I could have asked these questions to begin with. I would have known. All I had to do was ask, right? And now you're 3 months in, your probationary period's over, and now you got to either suck it up and stay with a job that you don't want, right? And you're losing out on all the things that you actually value.
Yep.
Or you have to quit now. And that's not going to look good on your resume, right? You hired him for 3 months and right? Like that timeline isn't going to look good in the future now, right? And so that's one of the importances of asking the right questions, because if you go in there and you find out, like you have to, I'm big on values and standards, right? Like if I go into a job interview, I'm also looking for a standard of job, right? Like no matter what level it is. And I don't know what kind of standard they have if I'm not asking them. Otherwise, I might get hired because I'm qualified. And then again, it might suck. And I mean, some people, you got to have a job. I've had jobs where I just absolutely hate because I needed a job. But again, those are those pros and cons that you get to weigh, right? You have a decision in this whole process. If they want to hire you, you have a decision still. Right? But what decision are you making? Are you making it just because you need a job? Cool. Take the job. If it's really that important, great. But if it's one of those things like where you have 3 or 4 opportunities, you don't have to settle for any of them just because one of them offered you the job.
Right.
But you have more information if you're asking the right questions.
I think that's the desperation too. Do you really need this job?
Yeah, and that's totally okay. I mean,
everyone wants their passion job, but sometimes I've been there.
Got to take a job. Yeah,
I need the job. I don't really give a shit if the job means I have to shovel shit all day long. I need the job. I need the money. I need the benefits. I need whatever it is that I need. So I need to answer these questions perfectly. That's a different interview.
Totally.
If I don't need the job, and I know everyone needs a job, except those people who say they don't need a job. Don't get me started there. If you're still curious, and you should be curious, and knowing what you're getting into, yes, you need the job and you need to do your best. But I think still asking great questions will get you a bigger opportunity in the finalist list. Here's another one that I think of all the different, and again, from a consulting, I have to interview for these consulting jobs all the time. It's not like they just hire me. There's 10 guys to pick from, and they have to interview us just as much. So I probably do this 2 and 3 times a year as far as interviews. But my famous question that always gets them like, wow, is, okay, if I'm looking at your parking lot at 5:00, at 5:01, is the parking lot empty? Or is it still, people are slowly straggling out to leave? And they all kind of like, wow, that's a great question. Because now they have to think about it. Like, and what I'm shooting for is this a workforce that is miserable to be here? And they're at the punch clock at 4:58 because they've made it through another day, and they're punching out and they're gone. By 5:01, the parking lot's empty. Meaning this is not a work environment that's working to get their work done for the day, meaning they'll stay the extra 20 minutes, half hour, or hour, or they just say, nope, I'm done. It's 5:00. I'm not giving you any more, any less. I'm out the door. Whatever I didn't get done today, I'll get done tomorrow. And if I do, I do. And if I don't, I don't. I want to know that more so. Who am I working with? You know, there's a Gallup, if you've heard of Gallup polls, and their famous stat is only 30, I think the latest one is 32%, 3 out of 10 people are engaged with their job every day. So think about that.
3 out of 10?
3 out of 10 people are engaged. That means 7 out of 10 people are either disengaged or what they call actively disengaged. And they have a nickname for it, a quiet quitter.
Quiet quitting, yeah.
So they show up every day, but they ain't doing dick. They're collecting a paycheck. They're doing as little as possible. And probably most of the time they're bitching about what a bad company this is and their boss sucks and blah, 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 blah. So when I ask these interview questions, I'm asking because I want to know what team am I walking into? If they say at 5, no, yep. And some of them may say, matter of fact, well, no, the day's over. At 5:00, everyone goes home.
Oh, that's even more insight.
Right. Now I know that he's one of those people. Again, that you may love that. Okay, 5:00, the work-life balance. Like, no, you put your time and go home. Okay, fantastic. But if they come back and they say, actually, no, I mean, 5:00 is 5:00. People work till whenever to get the job done. Okay. If you want to leave at 5:00, that might be a scary job for you because you'll feel like, oh, I can't leave. No one else leaves. Or if you want to spend extra time working and they say, no, everyone leaves at 5, and you're like, well, am I going to get in trouble for staying late? It's this weird way to look at things. But again, I bring that up only because you're there to interview them. Great. Outside of the fact that they give you a paycheck, that's the big perk. The rest of it is you have to deal with these people. You have to show up every day. You have to look around. Like, even if you don't have to go to the bathroom, ask to go to the bathroom before the interview. Go see how clean the place is. Like, see a different part of just the reception area and the conference room. Like, go see it all. If you're going to work at a machine shop, like, is the shop clean? Is it a filthy mess? Are there like, drive around the building? Do they weed the beds? Do they take care of the place? Like, this is who you're going to work for.
Yeah, and it's totally all dependent on what standard and what quality of job you want.
Right.
Like, that's really, I mean, if you're just going in, again, to get a job, like, who really cares? But if you want a career, or you want a job that you plan on sticking around with, and a job you want to move up with and all that stuff, like, don't you want to work for a place that, I don't know, fills you up a little bit? Has standards themselves, has values, has morals, has ethics, right? Like, all these things, like, has people who work together well, has whatever it is that you're looking for, right? But you don't know unless you ask. Right. Or you go look around, right? Like, for me, me, I'm like OCD. If I go into a place and it's like disarrayed and messy and stuff like that, I go nuts. Right. I can't stand it. And I get it to a certain degree, but like that's a thing for me. Right. And so, it's one of the things that I would look around and I would test the quality, like what standards do they live by? What standards is their company at? Because I can't care more about your company than you do.
Yeah.
But if that's really that important to me, I'd find out and use that in my decision-making process. If it's not that serious and all the other pros, right? That I get to make this list now is what happens. I think this is the cool thing. Like I get to make this list now. When I'm asking questions, I'm either putting the answer on the pros list or the cons list. When I'm driving around the building, I get to look at the garden beds and all that stuff, and I get to put it in the pros list or the cons list, right? And then when it's all said and done, I get to look at that list and say, okay, hey, they offered me the job. I have 30 things in my pros list, 5 things in my cons list. This one's pretty fucking important, but I think these outweigh it. Or vice versa. I got 30 things in my cons list, 5 things in my pros list. It's pretty horrible. I think I'm good. Right. But I can't do that if I'm not inquisitive.
Right.
I can't do that if I'm not curious. I can't do that if I'm not getting the interview in the first place and my resume sucks and all this stuff, right? Or people go onto my LinkedIn site and it's totally different than look, they're doing research.
Yep.
Right. Depending on where you're going, your Facebook page and your Instagram page are even at risk. Like if there's no congruency with who you are in these places, they're going to see it.
Oh, that brings up such a great point. I'm going to look right at the camera for this. And I'm going to say this to you young folks. Please, when you're entering the work world and college is done, scrub your social media pages. Employers are going to probably, and you're going to say, that's not allowed, that's not fair. Bullshit.
Nope.
If you show off pictures of spring break with you partying like a rock star in your bikini, or gentlemen, you're holding your buddy up and on a keg stand and you're doing like whatever it may be, it doesn't matter. Scrub your page and you think, I shouldn't have to do that. Like, okay, then don't do it. If you're a young lady and you want to come out to be a teacher, dude, one quick type into Google that just says Kathy Smith. Bloop,
OnlyFans.
No. Oh, God, that's a whole different world right there. But up comes your Instagram page, and we click on it, and up your Instagram page is public, and up there's you on spring break in your little tiny bikini, and up there's you sucking down beers with your friends, and there's you carrying on, and and it's all this stuff, and like, what do you think that the teacher that's going to do the interview is thinking? Like, and you're interviewing to be a high school teacher. Like you're 22, 23 years old. Your students are going to be 17 and 18. You're only 4 or 5 years older than them. They're savvy on social media. They're going to find your freaking pictures on Instagram and say, oh, Mrs. Smith is she's a little party animal. Like, are you kidding me? Okay, those days are over. Clear the deck. Like, and if you don't think you have to, good luck. Because everyone combs the internet now before they'll look at the resume, qualify. Yep, you have your stuff. And I've done this myself. I go right to the website. I start looking you up. I start stalking you. I'm figuring out everything. Who are you? Again, because my famous line, would I have a beer with you? If I get online and you're posting some shit that's weird and you're posting political stuff and you're poking, like, I'm sorry. I've just moved you into the maybe pile. And is that right or wrong? I don't know if there's some rule against it, but you're showing yourself off. I've already done a quiet interview of you, and all you had to do was scrub your freaking social media. So please get over yourself and showing off the fun side of you to a level of stupidity, I guess. And know that people are you've entered the world of business and adulthood. As dumb as that sounds, be smart about it.
Look, and this is all about, I don't want to say reading the room, but understanding what you're getting into, right? If you're not concerned that some party pictures are going to affect your career, by all means, nobody cares. Have a blast. Do whatever you do. And you mentioned like the post. I wish sometimes my Facebook page was not seen as me because I run a business, right? Like somehow they were separate.
Right.
I still post whatever the hell I want, but I get to do that.
Sure.
But I understand also that has some ramifications. If there's people who won't hire me because they don't agree with some of the things that I do, right? And I totally get there. And there's the people that I'm after who hire me because of the things that I'm congruent with, my personality and stuff like that. So a lot of it is just understanding what you're getting into. If you're going for, in a lot of when you're in the job force and you're looking for a career, this I think becomes a little bit more important, right? Because even in sports, I saw this recruiter. It was freaking amazing what he had this boot camp with these kids and stuff, and he was telling them, he's like, listen, do not post it on social media. Recruiters will not take you. It doesn't matter how good you are.
Yep.
If they see you on social media with your friends and you're waving around and you're drinking and you're partying and you're throwing up in the corner and you're doing all sorts of dumb shit, they will not recruit you.
Right.
Period. Right. And if you have high level executives that are in the hiring process, right, and they really want to know who you are, and they go on your social media and you're just a total
dumbass.
You said chotch, right? Or dumbass, right. Whatever, right? Like they're going to see you and totally skip over. They're not going to give you the time of the day, period, right? Because you're showing no maturity. You're showing no trustworthiness, no dependability, no any of the things that they're looking for. You look like a total D-bag sitting there like, so cool, man. Like I'm doing all this cool stuff, right? And it's like, no. Okay, you want to keep doing. How are you going to afford that when you don't got a job?
Right.
Right.
But it's that cool factor of social media. I mean, I've done this so well that I've actually interviewed a guy, and I knew that he was out the night before, and he was probably sitting in front of me, either massively hungover or still drunk, because he had his entire evening posted. It was all over. I think it was Instagram on one of them. And all I did was type in his name. I didn't do any research. It was probably 40 minutes before the interview, and I popped in his name, and up it popped. And he was out, boy. He was tying one on. A drink here. He had a purple drink here. He had a beer in this hand. You know, through the night, I could count 6 or 7 different drinks. And dude, if that's your world, that's your world.
Of course.
So be it. And if it doesn't affect your work, it doesn't affect your work. But I'm thinking, this is a pretty big day. You got an interview. And last time I looked at the salary we're going to pay you, it's a pretty good salary. And your prep for this was you went out and got blasted last night, and now you're walking in and I can see your eyes are all glazed over. You got circles under them, and whatever it may be. And it's like, I would have not known anything, but you're a dumbass and you posted it all over social media.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I will, and I will turn what's supposed to be a 45-minute interview into a 10-minute interview just by asking you the first 3 questions and seeing your answer. I'm like, yeah, this guy doesn't want this job. He didn't take it important. So,
not understanding what people want,
no,
and being unwilling to do what you have to do is just ridiculous.
Right.
Like you said, just get over yourself.
Right. So here's another one too that just made me think of that. And the social media thing drives me nuts. But I've heard this, and this is not an age thing. This is an across the board thing, and this is really what I think an interviewer wants, and your resume should show. And it's probably the line that I think I'd rather get punched in the face 10 times than hear this line come out of someone's mouth at work. And it's this famous line. That's not my job.
Oh my God.
That's not my job. And pardon my directness. Fuck you. That's not your job. I get it. You were hired to be a machinist. You were hired to be a secretary. You were hired to be an accountant. You were hired to be that's your role with the company. That's the expectation of what you're supposed to complete daily.
The minimum.
But, and this is the huge but, there are other things within the business that need to be completed. And if at any given point, you're the only person that has the time or just the ask, get it done. Now, and I don't know if it's all of Japan, but I've seen the Japanese culture where they don't have cleaning services. At the end of the day, they literally, all employees, and when I say all the way up to the tippity top, the CEOs and everyone, they clean for the last 30 minutes. The entire business, the factory, whatever space is at. So the CEO will be cleaning toilets. Everyone cleans. And their whole point is it's not beneath them. That we are all here for one effort. And when I'm sitting in a room, and especially at my level, because I'm sitting in rooms with VPs and C-level type people, all the way down to I'm bringing in line people to ask them questions. And when I say, all right, tomorrow when we show up, here's what I need to ask if I can have you do this, and it comes out of their mouth. That's not my job. You just went into a whole new bucket in my world. Like, okay, now I got to pay attention to you. That's not your job. I didn't ask you to go, disarm a nuclear reactor.
I'd give it a shot.
I probably would too, just for the fun to say for the story. But my point in bringing this up back to from job skills and resume and job, interviewing and all that stuff is make it known that you're excited to work at the place and no job is too low that you're willing to help. Obviously, don't demean yourself and say, "Yeah, hey, I volunteer. I'll be the toilet washer." If your job is, the head mechanic. But during that interview, it's like, you're a team player. You're here for the company. Whatever you need me to do. Yes, I'm the head mechanic, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to count inventory at the end of the night. And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to, clean up an oil spill.
Right.
Whatever it may be, it's show your eagerness to be a part of a team, because that's the big aspect, like a team. I don't care what age you're at. This doesn't just talk to young people. This is all people. I think the older we get, the more we believe that we're past certain jobs. If you ever, and I'm not saying this to brag, and I know, John, you're the same exact shit. We have a gym, and I will walk in one day and everything is in its position, and then I'll come back the next day and it's all changed around because John had a wild hair up his ass that day. He's like, you know what? I don't like where that leg press is. Well, the leg press by itself is probably 500 pounds with another easily 1,000 to 1,500 pounds of weights. It's not a small task to move this thing, and it will be on the other side of the room. And when I say other side, like 200 feet away. And I'm like, oh, was John here yesterday?
Sure was.
Because John said, okay. And I would tell you 99 out of 100 times it was a smart move. Does John have to do that?
Nope. Only 9 out of 100?
Yeah, sometimes I look and I think, what the But anyway, my point there is like, no matter what level you get, no matter who you are and what goes on, be willing to go the extra mile, to do the extra things. It's that 5 o'clock window that you're ready to go home and someone walks up to you and says, dude, I'm stuck. I can't figure this out right now. And I got this presentation in the morning. And you're like, oh, that sucks. Bye. That's a dick move. Yeah. Like, what would it take? Another 30 minutes, even an hour? Call your wife, call your husband and say, hey, got stuck. Billy's stuck on a project. I want to stick around and help him. That's team play right there. That's looking out for the guy. That's going the extra mile. And you do it for Billy. You don't do it because you want the accolades. Those are the people that employers are looking for. If you're the 5 o'clock punch card dude, okay.
Yeah, I think work ethic might just be a whole topic in itself. Because that's the quiet quitters. Touches a nerve with me a little bit.
Yeah. So I think the culmination of all of this is resumes are kind of the ticket into the theater. You get in, so it better have enough that qualifies you for the role. Make it clean. It's about your words on the page and what you've done. Whether you format it with a pretty right column that's a different color and a photo at the top, and you spend more time worrying about putting lines on a page, and it's all bullshit. It's get your information there, elaborate enough to show that you know the job, and get the interview. Then when you're in the interview, it's ask more questions. Be ready.
Legally Blonde says to write your resume on a pink piece of paper because then it stands out.
And honestly, I would tell you, if you're going to do anything like that, I agree with that 100%. I've been talking to a few young people that are already in their mid-20s and they're sick of their first role. And I said, well, you better stand out.
Stand out. It's not hard to do anymore.
Right. And if Indeed or LinkedIn is your thing, well, then make one of your headers stand out. And what that may mean is that you put a weird word in a parentheses, like go-getter or driver or whatever it may be. Like something has to make you stand out. If it means put it on pink paper, put it on pink paper. If Indeed is where they posted their job request, find out where they are. And I've advised this to a lot of people. Send a FedEx envelope to the interviewer. Find out who it is. You can figure it out. Find out who it is and send them a FedEx. It will cost you $55 to send it overnight, but it will get to John Smith as the head of HR tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. because you did first delivery, and he'll open up like, what's this? And your cover letter should say, I hope this got your attention. I'm really eager to get an interview with your company, whatever it may be. To just hit send on Indeed, you and 20,000 other people applied for that job across the U.S.
There's people applying on Indeed for jobs that they don't even
Right.
have any idea what they are. They're just clicking buttons.
Right. So it's dumb. So the point, like, you got to be unique in today's world. Everything is quick and easy. So everyone's just dumping a button and moving shit forward and writing a quick resume and then trying to get through the interview and who do you know and all of you. Be smart about this. Like, take the time, work harder than you've ever worked before for the job. Be curious about the company you're working for. Like, show the person, I'm not just my resume. I am more than that. And the interview should exude that.
Absolutely. But more importantly, you should make sure that you hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're using, the like as well, and the notification thing, so you can get updates on all of this stuff. So that was good.
Reach out.
Cool.
If you have questions about this stuff, I love it. Just put something in the comments. I'll private message you and would love to hear what your thoughts are.
Absolutely. Topics in the future, comments on the previous episode, any of that stuff. It's awesome.
Good stuff, guys.
Take care.
Peace.